Hello and welcome to the Young Tongues podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today for our second episode of our second season. My name is Barbara Fountain and I am the founder of the Young Tongues, a peer-to-peer support group for young tongue cancer patients. Now, we're not joined by my fabulous Jamie today. However, I have two other amazing guests for you lined up. Welcome to both Sarah and Cheryl from Cancer, Sex and Intimacy. Good morning and welcome, my lovely ladies.
Hello.
Good morning.
Yeah, good
Hi.
morning.
I am so delighted to have you here today with me today. Let's start off, if you can tell our listeners about your amazing project and how you came to found Cancer, Sex and Intimacy.
Well, the Cancer, Sex and Intimacy project really came off the back of feeling those gaping spaces in that holistic cancer care, that there was a lot of silence around the subject of cancer, sex and intimacy. I personally was never asked about how I was doing as a sexual being. Um, Potential side effects were never mentioned to me. And then when I did have my own personal issues with sexual health after my stem cell transplant, I was left completely shocked and in the dark, and I didn't really know what to expect. Um, so I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in January 2017. I had chemotherapy, radiotherapy to the chest area, and then I had a stem cell transplant in February 2018. And it was, during the treatment, obviously there were ebbs and flows in energy, but I wasn't having any kind of profound effects on my sort of libido and sexual health at that point. But it was after what was a very aggressive kind of treatment, the stem cell transplant, that I was really profoundly affected in terms of my ability to have sex and intimacy in the way that I wanted. So yeah, at no point was I ever asked or told that there could be these potential side effects. And then when I did eventually pluck up the courage, 3 months down the line to ask my CNS, she was kind of a bit flummoxed. She was like, "Oh, I've never heard of this before. Maybe just try some lube," and shut me down. So I immediately, that goes to heart. Never heard of this before. I'm completely alone. I was already feeling alone to then feel more alone. But then actually I thought, you know what? No, I can't be alone. Cancer and cancer treatment has a profound effect upon the body, the mind, the soul, which is so intrinsically linked to your sex and sexuality. So that put me on the path to find out, like, okay, am I alone? And I certainly am not. A lot of people are deeply affected by this. Um, so I got talking with someone from Macmillan Cancer Support, a really wonderful, engaging person called Emma Quintel, who I was talking to at a Macmillan event, and it just popped into my head. I was like, you know what we should do? We should do a sex toy workshop for women affected by cancer, and it should be fun and exciting and explorative, put the fun back into this side of our lives. And it was at our first event, which was at the amazing Shush Women's Store. Go online, look them up. They're brilliant. Lots of information, support, toys, lovely things. And it was at that event that I met the wonderful Cheryl, and we went on this journey together.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed in July 2017 with stage 4 neuroendocrine cancer, really weird cancer. And again, like Sarah, I'd started treatment, had major surgery to the abdomen, and had quite a long scar from between the breastbone right down to the knicker line. And at no point was it mentioned how you navigate reintroducing yourself to sex, pleasure, intimacy. Because I appreciate it wasn't, around the breast area, the genital area, but the abdomen played a large part in intimacy. Never discussed with me. And I just felt like I need to ask this question. So as my kind of peer group started to grow in the cancer community, I put out a survey. I think it was the end of 2018, going into 2019. And one of the questions I asked was, has sex or intimacy ever been discussed as part of your treatment or your long-term healthcare needs? And 92% of the people said no, which was quite shocking when you looked at the answers, the responses to the other questions. So that stood out for me. And being someone that has always kind of not been afraid of sex and intimacy, not been afraid to discuss it. If you don't want to hear it, you can shut your ears down, but I'm going to talk about it. I'll find someone else to talk about it too and have a laugh. Anyway, I then met Emma Quintal, who was the engagement lead that Sarah mentioned. And I said something similar that Sarah said. She said, okay, there's actually a wonderful workshop taking place down in the Shush Women's Store. And I thought, okay, I'll go along. So I went along, and that is where I met wonderful, wonderful Sarah. And obviously our lives have become entwined since then within the project. But at that meeting, or that workshop in particular, that's where I came across other people that had really, I'm going to use the word suffered, because some of their pain and their physical pain and emotional pain was really, really unnecessary. If they'd been spoken to or given some guidance or even signposted, if, they didn't know how to help them, they wouldn't have had that need for that workshop. The workshop would have taken a different shape in terms of just fun and pleasure. But instead, we had to deal with the pain. And I walked away from Sarah's workshop thinking, wow, something has to change. That was enormous. We had a laugh, but the pain, I carried it home, and I thought, no, it doesn't sit right with me. So Emma put us together within 2 years? Because the pandemic came along and slowed down, but she still managed to put us together. And it's just been magic ever since, because I think our worlds needed to collide at that point.
Yeah, and I'm so glad they
It's
did.
amazing when things happen like that. I'm just conscious that we do actually have healthcare professionals listening to this podcast who want to learn more about how they can support young tongue cancer patients they come across. To those listening, what would your words of wisdom be of what you've learned of how they can make a conscious effort to support a patient, especially maybe someone who's, feels a bit nervous about talking about sex to their patient and how to approach it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because it is hard to know what to say. And also, firstly, to say there are a lot of amazing healthcare professionals that do ask, that do advocate, and the people that work with us. So it's not this kind of broad brush that we're sort of saying that healthcare professionals never ask the question, but the majority don't, sadly. And I think when you're a patient, you enter the consulting room, you trust that person. You have to. You put your life in their hands. So when they put it on the table, say it's okay to talk about sex and intimacy, suddenly that weight is lifted off us, the patients. We suddenly feel like, okay, I can put value into this part of my life. Yes, I'm having this treatment that's either prolonging my life or saving my life or giving myself a better quality of life in terms of cancer. But actually, I can also look at that other side. So I think it can start with simple questions like, we're aware that this treatment can have an impact on libido, for example, a kind of a soft start. Or we're aware that this kind of treatment could induce early menopause. It can have quite a profound effect upon your ability to have maybe the sex you were having before. Has this been affected? Maybe even saying have your relationships been affected by cancer treatment? It's just that kind of opening the door and remembering it's sexual health. So it's absolutely valid to ask someone about how their sexual health is being affected by the very profound treatment.
And also just to reiterate with tongue cancer, obviously it affects your face, your mouth, your tongue, which is, it's a very intimate part of your body. We're not just we're not just talking about genitals. We're talking about your full body experience, and also most of us end up with scars on our arms and legs and other parts of our body. How to relearn how to kiss is really important, and to not feel alone with that and alone with your partner within that experience, and to know that there is a wider community at play here who struggle with the same things you do. So I think that is a really important conversation to have in the clinical setting, because again, being a rare cancer, it can be really difficult for someone to find their community. You know, they might have not heard of the Young Tongues yet, although I hope if you're a healthcare professional and listening to this, you will have pointed them in our direction. But they might not want to be part of a support group. You know, that might come further down the line. So this seems like the perfect point for me to bring up this fabulous book. So for anyone listening who's not watching us on YouTube, I am holding up a little booklet with the most beautiful cover, which is multi-coloured, and it says "Pleasure and Intimacy: A Guide for People Living with Cancer." Now, I discovered you because I attended a workshop and I heard you speak, and then you told us about this book. And as our listeners know, I have a bit of extra baggage on top of the cancer in terms of having had a traumatic experience with sexual consent, shall we call it? And again, sorry, I'm slightly segueing here. We aren't just cancer patients. There is a whole life that makes us who we are. So everyone has their own journey to go. But I found this booklet so helpful. Can you tell our listeners a bit more about it and how you developed it and some of the themes that you explore? I love the word explore within it.
Well, the booklet itself, credit has to go to everyone within our steering group, and in particular, a lady called Caroline who runs a Fruit Fly Collective. So she does a lot of work around parenting and cancer. This booklet took quite a few months in the first phase of our project to put together. We did surveys for colours, designs, you know, the sort of colours that people wanted to see, not see, like too many pinks and so forth. We wanted it to be aesthetically pleasing to everyone. So no matter what your gender was, you wouldn't feel afraid to pick it up or walk around. So the steering group helped us shape it. We asked questions about what needed to be in there, put social media questions out there and surveys, and we basically made sure it was patient-led. That was really important to Sarah and I. We didn't want it to just be what we thought or what we'd researched and just put it together. We wanted it to come from life experience itself so that whoever picked it up would realize that it's coming from a place where you know, you get it, you understand. So there are lots of lovely quotes and things from Shush and everything about lubes through to sex, through to intimacy, through to your emotions. Everything came together through what we've been doing at the collective since 2021, Sarah?
I'm terrible with dates. I think we've been doing this. We've definitely been doing this for a good 3 years now, that's for sure. But yeah, Cheryl, totally right. Just letting it be led by those patient voices. And you know, Barbara, you touched upon how like body image is such an important thing. And it's not just about the sort of what's between your legs and what's happening there. It's actually about like how you feel about your body, yourself, the relationship you have to your body if you're single, and also the relationship you have with a partner if you are with someone. So we wanted to really start with that kind of holistic journey, just slowly reconnecting with the self. And then as you move through the booklet, yeah, there's the lubes, the toys, when you do feel able to maybe take the physical touch to the next stage. But just knowing that even hand holding or massaging the self, that can be the brilliant first steps towards reconnecting with that side of you. And yeah, so the wonderful collaboration we had at the time with Caroline through Fruit Fly, she was attending all the workshops we were running, making notes, that, you know, things that were really coming up time and time again. And then yeah, with the surveys we did and everything. So yeah, it really feels, and what's lovely is we get, you know, people saying to us like how it has been helpful, and I think that is testament to just all the voices that contributed. And for me, like having Hodgkin's lymphoma, it's not like a kind of obvious cancer that would be, to me it is. I think every cancer has the potential to be, you know, for sex and intimacy, but I think sometimes people can make assumptions like, but why on earth would that affect your sexual health, but like, why on earth would it not? So yeah, we wanted that book to really talk to every kind of cancer.
I think you've really achieved that. I really think you do. And I think, like, for anyone listening, and depending on where they are within, I can't use a different word other than journey. I know we all hate the word journey, but it's sort of appropriate. But, we go through the operations, the different kinds of treatments, and something really impactful is happening to our bodies whilst we're also in a state of fight or flight, in survival mode. And it will take time. I think it's important to remind everyone that it will take time, and to be patient and kind with yourself, that you're not just going to bounce back and be back to your old self that you were before. But also there's a point in making that there isn't a reason why you can't make your way back to a version of the experiences you had before, although they might have to be slightly different. And I just to pick up some of the themes in the book that I personally really felt helpful. And I'm 5 years out, and I am very conscious that people look at me and go like, "Oh, you look great though," and you're rocking it, you're doing all these things, but don't know that behind closed doors, this has really impacted my feeling of sense with my own body, the relationship that I am in. And what I really appreciated about this book is how softly it approaches the subject. It doesn't feel like a sledgehammer, Sometimes I associate sex and porn and all of that with like, whoa, really in your face. But this is so soft and so intimate, and so holistic in a sense. And I found it a great communication tool to use with my husband, to start having this conversation and being able, not to go through the whole book at once, but just to go through sections, and then be able to, have really natural conversations about things and how I felt, and also how he felt. Because I've said to him, aren't you sometimes grossed out by the fact that, my tongue is like a bit weird now? And for him to have the freedom, if he wanted to say, yeah, actually I do. It's taken me a moment to get used to that, and to have a really open and honest and helpful conversation about it, because it doesn't take two, actually. We'll get onto that later. But in my situation, it did take two. And one of the things I am most grateful for, no, not most grateful, but one of the things I'm very grateful for you have inspired me to redecorate my bedroom. I had no idea how boring it was, and how sterile it was, and how it really was a really unsexy place.
Oh,
So the fairy lights are out, the candles are out, and it's so much more zen. So thank you for that. And sometimes it is something just really simple like that. I just let's start with the exploring yourself part. We've previously had a chat about how maybe our generation, I'm in my mid-30s now. When I was younger, we never talked about masturbating. When we as teenagers talked about sex, it was always based on the teenage magazines, and it was always about how to make it pleasuring for the man, not for us. And I had this revolutionary conversation with my childhood friends back in Switzerland of going, why have we never talked about this? And actually, we still were feeling so uncomfortable of going like, so what do you do? And then they're like, oh my God. And it was great. But let's reframe this now, and let's talk about reclaiming that power of masturbation and how normal it is, and where to start after you have been through a physically traumatic experience.
it's a big one. I know, but just sort of pick up on that. But yeah, for me, I'm 33 now in school. I don't think I learned what a clitoris was until I was 17, which I think is shockingly old when you're having biology lessons and you're talking about anatomy and things like that. So it's absolutely shocking. I do think it is changing now, which is brilliant. But for, generations now and beyond, I think it's like, number one, it's like solo sex, masturbation, solo play, whatever you want to call it, is just a wonderful way to start, even if you are with a partner. And that does not have to be gentle touching as well. It can be just really feeling your body. Do something luxurious for yourself. Have a lovely shower, or maybe apply some wonderful lotion. Do something where you can really connect with your body. Feel how your hands are against the skin. Maybe you have a part of your body there's a scar somewhere. What does that feel like, just to gently touch or to apply something that might nurture it in some way? Or what does it feel like to massage your toes? I don't know. Maybe you haven't really explored what those sensations feel like yet. Finding those new erogenous zones gently, and then you can build up to maybe buying a toy. I certainly know for me, post cancer, I do need to use toys because I find them more comfortable. And sometimes I can find a finger is a bit too stimulating actually for me. So it really is what feels good for you. And vibrators now can be incredibly petite and lovely. They can start with the most rumbling of gentle vibration, and they can start on any part of the body. Any part of the body. A massage with a gentle vibrator, just sort of seeing what that feels like. Body pain, what feels good. It's okay for sensations to change, but you might find new things that feel good.
Yeah. And to add to that, I would say that, as Sarah said, solo sex, it starts in the mind, really. And I think you need to take the time to respect that and realize, on Monday, you might not, emotionally feel like any form of masturbation or pleasuring yourself or just sensually touching yourself. But by Tuesday, Wednesday, depending on what you might have read, what you might have seen, or the conversation you might have had with someone, that could change your mindset and get you into the mood. It could be music. It could be reading. It could be writing love notes, or, a dirty little one-liner to your partner if you have one, or someone that you're connecting with on an app for dating. Whatever you choose to do, that's where it starts. It starts in the mind. So for me, that's really, really important to remember. And take your time, as Sarah said. Be gentle with yourself. Use your silks and your lubes, and it could be a scarf that you use that just runs off your body. It could be anything that brings you pleasure. That's what it is. And being the month of, isn't it masturbation month? When
Isn't it always?
are masturbation month in February, so get it on.
Amazing, amazing. I didn't know this, so yes, I am very glad this is dropping in February. Amazing. Yeah, it also just reminded me of another one of the recommendations you made in your book, which is, do you call it audio erotica?
Yes.
Oh my God, yeah. And I hadn't thought about this in that sort of sense of like what turns you on. And I realized I've always been like a story person. Like when I watch a series and it gets steamy, if it's just steamy on itself out of nowhere, I'm a bit like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But if there's like a build up to it and there's sexual tension, I'm like, oh God, yeah, I'm feeling this. I'm feeling excited by this. And the same goes with listening to stories and using your imagination. So again, you can sort of start somewhere that has nothing to do with touch or with what we would traditionally perceive as being sexual or intimate, and then build up to that pleasure, which I think is so powerful. And I do wonder if us, women, or yeah, maybe in comparison to the stereotypical hetero man, have got a bit of this superpower of having this really big imagination. Because let's be honest, we've been fed Disney from a very young. I do wonder.
Well, this is the biggest sex organ, isn't it? The brain.
Right.
And just to sort of pick up a little bit on, what you're saying there, Barbara. I think we're fed this narrative of like sex being this spontaneous thing, and suddenly people just start doing it. But libido is so complicated, and rarely is libido like spontaneous. Right, maybe when you're a very horny teenager or something, you might sort of just suddenly feel like you want to do it. But as we get older, and especially if we have maybe hormonal changes or surgeries, things that impact how we feel, libido isn't going to be as sinful. So really understanding that libido is something that is much more responsive to a situation. So yeah, listening to some audio erotica just to put you in that space where you might start thinking about something more sexually, or to maybe make some time to have intimacy either with yourself or with a partner. That could be in a week, that could be in 3 days, it could be on the weekend when you know you're not going to be interrupted. Making time for intimacy is valid and important.
Absolutely. And we forgot to mention fatigue, obviously
Yes.
being a huge impacting factor
Yeah.
for a long time. No matter, what kind of treatment you have, there's fatigue after surgery, after radiation, after chemo, after immunotherapy. And if you have been unlucky enough to have all 4 of them, then, that's a huge impact on your body. I want to talk about relationships and how, just to also acknowledge that this journey will impact your relationships, including your sexual relationships. And for me, it was most noticeable that without us even knowing, me and my partner have fallen into this trap of being patient and carer. And even though I no longer require that type of support that he gave me in the early days, it's sort of stuck in our dynamic and has led to, challenges within our marriage. And we've since seen or seen professional help to help us navigate through that. But I do think it's really important that we talk about it, because sometimes we don't recognise it. And we didn't recognise it was the cancer that was actually contributing to this and how it was contributing to this. For me personally, it was quite, and my partner, it was quite harrowing what he had to do. We were freshly engaged, about to be married. I never foreseen my fiance having to do things like wiping my bum, which is a very intimate thing, to like carry me about whilst I was like naked and really vulnerable, and the touch changed. It gone from like a intimacy, caring touch to a managing you, caring touch, which is different. So I don't know what sort of the insights were that you're collected
It
on
is,
that subject.
yeah, it's a huge thing. And I think dynamics do and will potentially change. And we're never prepared for that, I think. Certainly not by healthcare professionals. And so you're sort of having to navigate this new way of experiencing each other. And communication, I think, is hard for any couple. It is hard to sort of talk about relationship dynamics, and especially hard to sort of talk about sex and intimacy, especially if you experienced intimacy in sort of like a particular way for a certain amount of years. So for that dynamic to suddenly change, but kind of taking those steps to sort of change that dynamic again, with anything, it can start slowly, and it can start at the kitchen table over a cup of tea. It doesn't need to start in a sort of a bedroom setting where you're like, oh, we really should try and reconnect in this way, because it will be difficult for it to work in that context, especially if those conversations haven't been.
Yeah. And I think also, as Sarah just said, starting at the kitchen table, somewhere else where you're not sort of under pressure to feel like you have to be sexual, you have to be intimate, you have to be ready. It could be, for me, I think it really just comes down to taking the time and moving out. Just as you done, you looked in the booklet and you decided you were going to change your bedroom. So your exterior, what you see, how you see it is very different. It might be a different bed, change of bed clothing, change of colours, tones, the lights you put in, the candles you put in, switching the bedroom around so it doesn't actually look similar to what it looked like, before when you had your treatment or your surgery and you weren't in the best space. So maybe you could take your time and do that in the bedroom, maybe move it around the whole apartment or house, wherever you live, and just change how everything looks, change your pictures, change the type of colors of clothes you even wear, how you do things. Just take your time and gently rearrange things, and it might start to then tap into how you feel about yourself. And that medical touch, that kind of caring medical touch will change over time, because those hands are the same hands, yes, but used in a different way, thought about in a different way, can make all the difference.
And we had some lovely advice from a psychosexual therapist who joined us on one of our podcasts that we recorded in end of last year. It's like, start dating again. Even if you've been together for 10 years, 20 years, start from the beginning. Bring that romance back first, because I think when touch has changed into something that's like caring but medicalized at the same time, it's like, say, I'm going to take you out tonight, and then next week maybe you can take me out. Just starting in those kind of gentle ways, and holding hands as well, giving each other a hand massage, playing with those gentle ways of just reforming the touch, transferring the touch back to something that's more intimate as opposed to medical.
Really, really insightful. And also to anyone listening, who finds themselves in this situation, I just want to take away the shame.
Yeah.
There is no shame in this. It happens to all of us in different ways, of course. But I remember when, me and my husband, and I have asked him that, but I can talk about this, by the way, but it's, we, when we sat down and we realised that we needed help, gosh, there was so much shame, because, my God, we'd only just been married,
Wow.
Yes, we've been together for a long time, but it does. And I truly believe that being able to have those conversations, it takes a lot of courage, and takes a lot out of a person to be able to go and say, I'm not happy, but you're totally okay to have those conversations. And not having them, I personally think, can lead to a way worse outcome than having them, and having them
Very,
early.
very true.
Now, Sarah, you mentioned the word dating. Now, I'm conscious we have a lot of people in our community that weren't in a relationship when they were diagnosed, or have since separated and are single again. And single and ready to mingle, but don't know how.
Yeah. So where do I start? Well, I know certainly for me, there are things that I do need to kind of bring up if I'm with a new person, especially if I fancy them and it looks like it's going towards a sort of a sexual relationship. And that's hard. It's sort of a similar thing with if you are in a relationship, communication with someone you've just met as well. It's challenging. I think it is also about really do find that space where you are ready. You always need to dip the toe, of course. You never know if you're quite ready until you've sort of given it a go. And I was in a relationship during my treatment, but it was quite we weren't really super serious. So that was kind of challenging in itself. And it did end actually after the stem cell transplant. And I didn't really feel able to be with anyone else again for a good 3 years, which I know might sort of sound suddenly like a long time, but by waiting until I was ready, I actually now feel very confident, very happy and excited. And I've been on the apps. It is the way that a lot of people meet now. Um, and I would go through the apps, I'd be swiping, and there would be people that would say, I've just had chemotherapy, so looking to date, but energy levels might change. People are actually talking about it. I've seen cancer survivor under one person's thing. I personally didn't put it there, but it's kind of nice to see that people are, and that's okay. If that if you actually want to state it in advance, just to really know who you're going to meet in that moment is not going to be judgmental, then that's brilliant. And for me, when I'm on a date with someone, it's kind of a bit of a green flag if I mention either on date 1 or date 2 about my cancer experience and the issues that I have. So after my cancer treatment, I ended up getting something called vaginismus, which for those who don't know, who are listening, it's like an involuntary tightening of the vagina. So any kind of penetration is excruciating, whether that's penis, finger, dildo. It can be very painful. And a lot of people expect, well, no one should ever expect anything, but society tells us that sex is penetration. It's not. It is a wonderful world of a million things, and we should certainly be talking about, even if you're kissing on the sofa with someone and, there's part of the body are being kind of explored sensually. For me, that's sex. That's how I define it. You can find your own definition of sex. It really doesn't have to be what we've been told traditionally, that it's sort of penis in vagina or something in a hole in the body. So I think really finding what your boundaries are. Boundaries are sexy. They're not unsexy things that are going to put people off. Say, you know what, actually, I don't want my arms touched. Maybe there are scars on your arms, or maybe the genitalia is too sensitive. It's okay to say, I don't want this part of my body touched. But you know what, I would love you to explore my neck. My neck is incredibly sensitive, or my feet should be worshipped. You can really reframe what sex can be. But allow yourself that time. It did take me time. I lost a lot of desire for people. I wasn't actually really fancying anyone. And I think that was a defense mechanism. I think it's often down the line you work out why things are a certain way. And I was scared, because I was scared of how people would perceive my body, or what my body could and could not do. I did have some psychosexual therapy that really did help me. I know that's not always accessible to everyone, but it helped me just appreciate my body again, and that actually what mattered was my pleasure, not other people's pleasure. My pleasure came first. That was what was important, what gave me pleasure. Because I was so kind of het up with, am I going to disappoint potential partners because my body doesn't behave in a certain way? Actually, that doesn't happen. Well, it was me.
Yeah. And I stumbled into dating just quickly, just by accident. I met someone in a cancer clinic. And we basically got called up together to go and get weighed, blood pressure checked. And he asked me if I wanted to dance down to the clinic. And I said yes, and we did. And from there, our worlds collided, but unfortunately, he became terminally ill and he died, which was really sad for me, for his family, for me. But during that time, the one thing we didn't have to really explore was how the cancer affected us. So he knew what fatigue was. I knew what fatigue was. I had surgery, he hadn't, but he'd had treatment that affected him in different ways. So there was a mutual understanding and a sort of respect between us that, okay, well, if you're fatigued today, I know, just give it a rest. We wouldn't be pushing those boundaries, as Sarah said. We just took our time, went along with life as it was, with that mutual understanding that we've both got cancer, different cancers, but we appreciate how they affect the body and the mind. Plus, he was a psychosexual therapist anyway, and a normal therapist, but so he kind of got it.
I think it's that uniqueness, and I know we're supported by Shine Cancer Support to run this project, and through their meetups, that like people are meeting sort of that, whether they have a mutual experience of cancer, and there is that shared understanding, and but then if you meet people that maybe cancer has never kind of crossed paths in their lives, that they themselves or family members have not been affected by cancer, they won't know. And I think fatigue is especially something that's so hard to articulate when you haven't, it doesn't matter how much you sleep. Like sometimes this is just going to be a part of my life and a part of my lived experience right now. So explaining that to a partner And I think we have to acknowledge sometimes partners aren't mind reading as much as they should be. So that's where communication is really important. And I know a lot of the time, if I'm communicating with people, new partners or something, and there is maybe like something that doesn't feel quite right, and maybe if the libido is lower for whatever reason, it's not because I don't desire you, it's because my body is just not going to respond in this way right now.
It's such an important point. Such an important point. And also for us as patients to bear in mind that actually, I can only talk about my relationship here, but I'm pretty sure like relationship between me and my husband, I know that it has affected his confidence in terms of my libido being down, because he undoubtedly will be thinking, what am I doing wrong? And to be able to communicate to him that it has nothing to do with him and it's not his fault, and it's not because he's not desirable, actually quite the opposite. It's just how my body's reacting now in this new reality we're finding ourselves in, which I do believe lots of heterosexual relationships have that. I don't know what it's like in other relationships. I can't speak from that point of view. But yeah, and also you just mentioned, Sarah, shout out to Shine Cancer Support. I'm a Shiny myself, I'm a network leader, and that's how we all met.
Yeah.
And they are amazing in what they do. They offer support for people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and have brilliant groups and brilliant conversations. So to anyone in the UK, I can most definitely recommend that as well. And just before we wrap up for today, there is another linked point that I want to pick up on you. And I know you're both big advocates about talking about the menopause. Many of us get impacted by having an early onset menopause due to the treatment that they have. I personally haven't, so I just was wondering what your experience has been with that.
For myself, I approached the menopause naturally, but I think the treatment kind of pushed it along a bit quicker. I didn't recognize what it was. So, the whole body was just invaded literally by pain, by dizziness, all manners of things. And then I went to the GP. They weren't particularly helpful. But in the end, I got myself onto the waiting list for a menopause specialist clinic. And not all of the UK has access to it. But if you do, it's a wonderful resource. It's the best thing you could do. And they looked after me, and still do, holistically. So whether it was the HRT that I had to use, which really helped, all I can say is that I went from being unrecognizable 2 to 3 years ago, to bringing Cheryl back. I actually feel like I got my life back on track. And there's a wonderful Make Menopause Matter campaign by Diane Danzebrink. Everyone definitely follow her. And this is the booklet.
Titled Understanding Menopause.
It's a fantastic resource. It's free. It's available as a download. If online, they have their own website. And they're basically championing the government to do something. So to put this discussion in the school curriculums, to put it in the workplace, to put it in on our socials, to just make it known that it can affect you. And in particular, when you're going through cancer, the treatment itself can induce the menopause, which for some people is a sudden shock to the system, to the body, to their libido, to their relationships. So I wouldn't even like to look at the figures of the amount of relationships that sort of are lost or start to decline because of it. But definitely get yourself this booklet. It is the wealth of information. And we put it in our goodie bags, don't we, Sarah?
Yeah, exactly.
Alongside our booklet, because we feel it's really important that people know that there is help out there for them.
I think that what is sort of what shocks me as well is why it isn't brought up in the consulting room. I was actually never told, though I was told indirectly that I could go into early menopause, because fertility was brought up a lot, and they were like, "Oh, this treatment will probably make you infertile." And you're shocked. Everything's kind of happening So you don't put two and two together. I kind of didn't realize that infertility meant I would go into early menopause, but you're being told a million things about treatments and side effects and all these awful things that you do really need your hand held through this process. So when I did then go into early menopause after my stem cell transplant, it just all kind of like shocked me even more. If I'd been pre-warned or properly pre-warned, I think I would have been much more prepared. And it took quite a long time for me to be put on HRT, so hormone replacement therapy. Luckily, as someone who does not have a hormone positive cancer, I was able to go on HRT. And that has definitely helped with the menopause symptoms. But for a lot of the cancer community, they can't have HRT if the cancer that they have is receptive to estrogen. So that's a whole other world. So that's why it's so important that people are referred to the menopause clinic, because there are things that you can do outside of HRT. There are very holistic ways that you can be supported through a menopause journey. But it's just, we need those referrals. We need that information. And booklets like the one that Cheryl just showed us is a brilliant way to find that out. And there's a lot of online communities, and peer support, peer sharing of what you can do there is so important. But we need more menopause clinics, that's for sure.
We do. Definitely.
We really do.
Yeah, we also need more general awareness about menopause, and there's definitely been a lot of change because I think we are starting to talk more publicly about the menopause. I am still new to the subject, which is actually crazy that as a 35-year-old woman, I never really knew much about the menopause. I knew it's something that would affect me down the line, but I had no idea to what extent until, engaging with recent campaigns. I'm also take a lot of faith out of the fact that, again, sorry, bringing up my husband a lot today, but he attended a menopause awareness course at his place of work. He works for a council. It's part of their continuous development. And he came home and he gave me all these facts. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And he said, I feel so bad because I have worked with so many women of an age who probably will have had menopause or have made totally the wrong assumptions, or I wasn't as empathetic or understanding of what they were going through because I had no idea. So I think it is really important that our men in our life and in the wider public and people we work with understand how impactful the menopause is. So no, thank you for sharing that resource. And speaking of sharing resources, we'll put everything we discussed today into the show notes. But before we round off today, please tell us, how can people find you? How can they learn more about your work? How can they support you and follow you?
Okay. Well, on social media, you can find us on sex_cancer_intimacy. That's our project. Feel free to join us, share, attend our events, make suggestions. If you want to become part of our steering group, fantastic. That's how you'll find us on socials.
Yeah, and then
Sarah?
you can email us on cancerandintimacy@gmail.com. We couldn't put sex in the email because if we emailed you, it would go straight into your spam or your junk. So cancerandintimacy@gmail.com, because we want that information out there. Nothing going into junk, please. And yeah, you can request the booklet through the email or DM us on social media. And yeah, please give yourself that time for pleasure.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That is such a perfect way to end today. Give yourself that time for pleasure. I love it. Thank you so much, Sarah, Cheryl, for taking the time for joining us today. And I hope our paths will cross again in the near future. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.